Here you go. Do you have limitations with daily activities after an elbow fracture? This video will show you our favorite exercises for elbow mobility, strength, and activation. Stay tuned. Prehabbers, welcome back to the channel. Dr. Arash and
Kirsten, the woman behind the camera.
The woman behind the camera. So today we're talking about elbow fractures, and this is a special episode because Kirsten has actually gone through this experience before. Do you want to touch on that?
Correct. 2013, I had a pretty gnarly snowboarding accident and had a pretty major fracture in my humerus. Yeah. Spent 5 days in the hospital, major reconstructive surgery, had multiple plates and a bunch of screws put in. Some of them have been since taken out, but it was pretty intense. It was like some of the worst pain I've ever been in. And also, you know, soon after the surgery, I had very limited range of motion. Yeah. 10 days post-op, I saw my surgeon and said, you know, what's the prognosis? I'm very active. I love to do yoga, a lot of things that require, you know, full extension, full flexion. And he said, which is some of the best advice I've ever heard. You get out of it what you put into it, as far as physical therapy. So.
Exactly. So sometimes you may go into conservative care, meaning it heals on its own. Other times you may need to get it fixated. Either way, the solution is that you want to improve mobility and strength of the elbow. Now there are 3 bones that the elbow consists of: the humerus, the radius, which is towards the thumb, and then the ulna, which is towards the pinky. Now these 3 bones create 2 joints which allow the elbow to flex, extend, and supinate and pronate. We're gonna talk all about these motions and how you can build up mobility and strength today. So early after an injury, whether you have surgery or not, you're probably gonna wanna keep it immobilized for a little bit. Now during this time frame is where you can move things proximally, like your mid-back, doing things like thoracic rotation, maybe getting the shoulder to move, or things distally, like your wrists and your fingers, while you're letting the elbow heal. Now, once your elbow is stable and you have medical clearance, range of motion is crucial to get early on so that you avoid all that secondary stiffness after the fact. Now, what we'll go through right now are a few of our favorite exercises for improving that range of motion, starting more on the passive side and then working our way into active range of motion. So remember, the 2 movements are flexion, extension, pronation, and supination. Let's start with the flexion-based movement, where Kirsten, you're gonna use the opposite arm to assist flexion, bringing your elbow, yep, exactly, trying to bring your hand toward your shoulder. And we wanna hold the end position for a few seconds before we come back. And sometimes if you really feel a restriction, we were just talking about how sometimes you wanna hold for a prolonged period of time so that way your body really adjusts to that new range of motion. So see what feels good for you. You wanna work into a little bit of restriction with medical approval, and then you can relax. So that's elbow flexion. And alter your wrist position too. Sometimes having the thumb up allows you to get a little more flexion. Sometimes having it a bit more supinated allows you to get more flexion. So that's something you can adjust. Now let's go into elbow extension, where we're actually gonna fulcrum over an elevated thing like a towel. And this is helpful because Kirsten here can adjust how much elbow flexion or elbow extension she wants to have based on where she puts the towel. So yeah, exactly. Now we're putting that towel a little bit under her elbow. She can get more extension. If for some reason she's limited and doesn't want to go into full extension, it's too painful, maybe we can start with a little less extension, where the towel is more towards the upper arm. And we're just hanging out here passively. And as you feel more and more comfortable, you'll eventually want to move that towel closer towards the elbow, getting that full extension. Same thing here, you can adjust the forearm position. If for some reason supination bothers you, you can go into a little more neutral position, trying to get as much extension as possible. So that's elbow flexion extension. Now, the next two are pronation, supination. And the key with these are to keep the elbow bent, because what sometimes people do if they keep the elbow straight as they do this, is you're moving the entire shoulder as you go into supination, pronation. The idea is to isolate that forearm as much as we can, so that way we keep the shoulder stable, elbow is bent, and we're using the opposite hand actually to pull the forearm into supination first. Supination is palm up. Think of holding like a bowl of soup, holding this position, few seconds, and then the opposite is pronation, where you bring the palm down. And ideally we get 90 degrees where the palm is face down or face up. However, that's not gonna be the case, especially early after you're starting to get that initial mobility. It's very restricted. Most times people like to stay in this neutral and they have a really small range. But as you slowly work into it, and you want to focus on moving slow and controlled. If you move quick, your body might spasm up and tighten up, and not like that. You wanna move slow, get your body comfortable with that range of motion. And yes, it looks like we're moving the wrist, but it's actually moving the joints up in that elbow area. So we're going back and forth. Now, this is passive. As Kirsten or as you at home start to feel more comfortable with passive, we want to work into active assisted, where you move with trying to help a little bit with that arm. So I'm trying to pull, using those muscles to create that motion, and then the opposite way, using those muscles to help. Eventually, after a few weeks of doing this, once you have full range passively, you're gonna want to just use the muscles actively to allow you to maintain that position. And this is gonna take some time. This doesn't happen with just a couple of sessions of mobility work.
Correct. It actually took quite a while for me to make big improvements, and it was really painful, but I would sit sometimes for 15-20 minutes in that position with putting that pressure on there. But it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
It's how you create a change in the body. You don't just do that. It's consistency over anything. Intensity is something that you don't want to push too much into, especially early on. Like I have people do this multiple times throughout the day just to get that body comfortable with the range of motion. You make a little bit of improvement in range of motion, and then once you stay sedentary and still, you drop. You want to catch it on the decline and continue to improve that range of motion over a long period of time. So as you work on the range of motion passively and actively, there is one overall active elbow exercise that I love that I didn't take you through this yet, but we'll go into elbow extension, straighten out the arm. We'll go pronation, keep that elbow straight. We'll come up into flexion, and then we'll do the opposite, supination and go down. Now we're working on pronation, supination, flexion, and extension through the entire range of motion. This gets a little bit of everything, and this is only meant to be done after the passive range of motion has normalized. So those are the best range of motion exercises that we have for you. All right, once range of motion is achieved, this is where the fun begins. We get to begin strengthening. Now with strengthening, all we have here is a resistance band, and we're gonna do the same motions going through pronation, supination, flexion, and extension of the elbow using that band. So we'll start with pronation, supination. You're gonna wanna anchor the band at your foot, and that's all you need is a resistance band here. You're gonna place the band on one side, Kirsten's gonna place it towards her thumb side. Now from here, she's gonna rotate into pronation, palm down towards the floor, as far as she can go, and we can even start with isometrics with these. With all these strengthening exercises, I wanna make sure that activation is there. The bottom of the forearm, those pronators are gonna work to create pronation. You may even feel a stretch if there's still some restrictions in terms of mobility. And then as you feel more comfortable, we'll go through isotonics, which is the range of motion while strengthening. And so that's pronation. We can do the exact opposite for supination. We can start supinated, hold here, good, keeping the arm strong, forearm strong. And then once you feel good there, we'll go in through some range of motion, perform the exercise in an isotonic fashion. That's supination, pronation. Now, there's an exercise that you can do both elbow flexion and extension at the same time with the band, which is what we're gonna go through now. So you're gonna straighten out one arm, get the triceps to engage there, shoulder blades pulled back, and then the opposite arm pulls into elbow flexion, good. You're squeezing with all the elbow flexors, the biceps, the brachialis, brachioradialis. Start isometrically, and then as you feel comfortable, you can go into isotonics, where you go through the range of motion, and then you straighten out this arm, you bend the opposite arm, bring the band together, and then repeat. Good. And then to normalize it, you want to switch towards the opposite side. Same thing, make sure you have some space here, and then you go in through elbow extension, elbow flexion on the opposite side. And yes, we're just focusing on all the elbow muscles, and that's the purpose of this video. But in the meantime, I also want to make sure that shoulder, that scapula, and all those wrists and finger muscles are also staying strong because of all the atrophy that probably happened with the immobilization period. All right, throughout this process, you may experience some numbness and tingling. What happens is all the inflammation, swelling, the lack of movement creates irritation of the nervous system. Now, I'll show you one easy neural exercise that you can do to improve pretty much all the nerves. It's mainly targeting the median nerve, but it'll get a little bit of each nerve going down your arm into your hand. So we'll start by bringing the arms in front of you, elbows extended, wrists come back, and then you straighten out, pull your arms back, squeeze your shoulder blades back, and you should feel the pull on the front of your arm, maybe even down into your hand, and then you bring your arms back together, and then repeat this for maybe 10 to 15 repetitions.
I really feel that too.
Yeah, you feel that pull.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you feel the pull of the nervous system, not necessarily the muscles. So you should notice as you pull back, you increase that stretch. Yes, you may get a little bit of the stretch of the forearms just by having the hands in front of you, but you want to get that neural stretch that goes all the way down towards your hands. So this is a good exercise to do at any point, especially once you have that range of motion, to continue to keep that nerve healthy. So let's go back to Kirsten's story, and Kirsten gave us a little intro, big picture overview of what happened, but I want you to kind of go a little more into the rehab process that you went through and a bit more on your experience. With
my experience, again, I'm really stressing being diligent about your therapy. I know it can be painful, and I know it can take some time. I mean, I would even, my therapist at the time had given me exercise to do that you can just sit on the couch and do. Some of these that you have to hold for 20 minutes, whatnot, you don't have to be taking much time out of your day if you were just, sitting around anyway. So it's a process, and if you are diligent about it, there's absolutely the chance that you can become, 100%, back to 100%. I mean, I pretty much am, my range of motion is pretty perfect nowadays. Yeah. So I'm very thankful for that. And also to keep in mind that just because you get through the rehab process, you get that range of motion back, doesn't mean it's going to be a perfect, repair. I still have metal in my arm. I still feel it every once in a while with certain activities. You really should strengthen and keep up with the strengthening of that area.
Prehab. Yeah.
The prehab.
The prehab. It's important because the stronger and more stable you are with your muscles, the less stress gets placed on the joint. And yes, we're talking primarily about the elbow, but this is also proximally, if that entire arm, that upper extremity remains strong, the less stress you're gonna place on the shoulder or the elbow specifically, especially if you take some time off and then get back into the gym. That's where people often irritate that previous injury. So if you're looking for more information on the elbow, wrist, or hand, we have a full elbow, wrist, and hand rehab program that takes you through a progression of movements, and we educate you along the way, kind of like we did in the video with the different movements, how hard to push yourself, especially during that early stage of rehab. If you're looking for something that's more proactive, we have the elbow, wrist, and hand prehab program that progresses from the rehab program that really builds up your strength and capacity. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks.
Hey, did you like this video? If you did, you should definitely check out the Prehab app. It includes all of our programs, a brand new workout library, and tons more videos like the one you saw today. Check it out by clicking on this link. You get a free trial. Take control of your health today.